My name's Samantha Cole, 35, and I never thought my family would blindside me like this. Last year, my parents slapped a $20,000 bill into my hands for my sister's wedding reception dress, honeymoon the works. I stared, thinking it was a bad joke. "You're kidding," I said, but their faces were stone cold serious. "No way." I shot back, my voice sharp. They didn't budge, acting like I owed them my savings. I was stunned. How could they expect me to bankroll her big day? A few days later, I stopped by their house to drop off Christmas decorations and overheard Dad on the phone. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "She'll pay right after Christmas Eve dinner." My heart sank. They weren't just asking. They had a plan to pressure me at our family's holiday gathering, thinking I'd cave under the festive lights. In their eyes, I wasn't just their daughter. I was their ATM. Anger surged through me, but I kept quiet, my mind racing. They thought they had me cornered, but I was already plotting a move they'd never see coming. By Christmas Eve itself, I had a surprise ready that would flip their world upside down. What happened at that Christmas Eve dinner changed everything. You'll want to hear how this unfolded. Before you hear my story, tell me what time is it right now where you're watching and in which city. I want to see just how far my story travels. It started 2 months before Christmas. I'm 35, living in Springfield, Missouri, where I've carved out a solid life. I own a cozy apartment, drive a paid-off car, and have no debt weighing me down. My job as a marketing specialist keeps me busy, and I've always prided myself on standing on my own 2 feet. But my family, they see my stability as their personal piggy bank. One evening, my phone rang. It was my older sister, Celeste, her voice dripping with expectation. "I need you to cover my wedding," she said like it was no big deal. $20,000 for the reception dress and honeymoon. You don't have a husband or kids, so what else are you spending it on? I froze her words, hitting like a slap. Did she really think my life was just a blank check for her dreams? "Absolutely not," I said, my tone firm. "That's not my responsibility." She scoffed, acting like I'd insulted her, and hung up. I sat there fuming, feeling like a tool they expected to use. A week later, I went to Mom and Dad's house to help set up for the holidays. As I carried a box of ornaments to the attic, I heard Celestia's voice on speakerphone in the living room. She was talking to Dad. "We'll get her to pay at Christmas dinner," he said, calm and certain. "She won't say no in front of everyone." My hands shook as I set the box down. They weren't just asking, they were plotting to corner me. I'd always helped out here and there, covering Mom's car repairs or Dad's medical bills. But this was different. This was a calculated move to guilt me into footing a bill I had no part in creating. I slipped out quietly, my mind racing. Celeste's entitled demand wasn't just a one-off. It was part of a pattern. Growing up, she'd always been the one who got her way new clothes extra allowance, while I worked summers to buy my own. Mom and Dad never seemed to notice, always quick to praise her, while I was just expected to keep up. Now they were teaming up to squeeze me for a wedding I didn't even want to attend. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I wasn't some ATM they could tap whenever they wanted. I'd worked too hard for my life to let them treat it like their backup plan. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my bank statements. Every dollar I'd saved was mine, earned through years of late nights and careful planning. Celeste had a job, some freelance gig that never seemed to pay enough, and a fiancé who made decent money. Why was her wedding my problem? The thought of her smug voice assuming I'd cave lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I started thinking about how to protect my money, my peace, and my future. They thought they could pressure me at Christmas, but I was done playing their game. I needed a plan, not just to say no, but to make it clear I was done being their fallback. By mid-December, I was ready to change the game. I'd spent too long letting my family treat me like their personal bank, and their plan to corner me at Christmas dinner was the last straw. I wasn't going to fund Celestia's wedding, and I was done letting them pull my strings. It was time to take back control. First, I tackled the financial ties. Years ago, I'd opened a joint bank account with Celeste to help her through a rough patch, paying her rent, covering her car repairs when she couldn't. It was a mistake I'd regretted ever since. She'd never paid me back, always promising next month while spending on designer bags and dinners out. I called my bank and told them to close the account. Are you sure? The teller asked, her voice hesitant. Absolutely, I replied, feeling a weight lift. I also stopped the automatic payments I'd been making for her phone bill. It felt like cutting a chain that had been dragging me down for years. My money was mine again, and I wasn't going to let her touch another cent. Next, I sat down to write the letter. I wanted it to be clear, direct, and impossible to misunderstand. I typed out every word with purpose. I wasn't paying for the wedding. Not the reception, not the dress, not the honeymoon. I explained how their demand was unfair, how I'd worked hard for my savings, and how I deserved to live my life without being their fallback plan. I printed it, folded it into an envelope, and tucked it into my purse. My plan was to deliver it at Mom and Dad's Christmas dinner on December 25th. They thought they'd pressure me in front of everyone, but I was going to turn their scheme upside down. As Christmas approached, I rehearsed what I'd say. I wasn't nervous, just determined. I'd spent years swallowing my frustration, nodding along to keep the peace. But peace at the cost of my dignity wasn't worth it. I pictured Celeste's smug smile, Dad's confident tone when he said I'd pay Mom's silent agreement. They expected me to cave under the holiday cheers, surrounded by family and the clink of wine glasses. I wasn't going to let that happen. I kept my plan secret, not even hinting to anyone. Every night, I read over my letter, tweaking a word here or there, making sure it hit hard, but stayed calm. I wanted them to feel the weight of my decision without giving them room to twist my words. December 25th arrived crisp and cold. I drove to Mom and Dad's house, the envelope burning a hole in my purse. The dining room was packed with relatives. The table loaded with turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce. Everyone was laughing, passing dishes, pretending we were one big, happy family. Celeste sat across from me, her engagement ring glinting under the lights, chatting about her wedding plans like they were already paid for. Dad carved the turkey, joking about the holidays. Mom fussed over the table settings, avoiding my eyes. I waited until dessert when the conversation slowed and the room felt warm and quiet. I stood up, my heart steady. I have something to say, I announced, pulling the envelope from my purse. I handed it to Celeste, who frowned, confused. Read it, I said, my voice even. She tore it open, her eyes, scanning the page. Her face went pale, then red. Dad leaned over, grabbing the letter. What is this? He demanded, his voice sharp. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. I didn't flinch. I'm not paying for the wedding, I said, looking straight at Celeste. I'm done being your bank. The room went silent. Celestia's jaw dropped, her eyes narrowing. You're so selfish. She spat, her voice shaking. Dad slammed the letter on the table. After everything we've done for you, he shouted. Mom just stared, her hands trembling. The other relatives looked away, awkward. I expected their anger, but it didn't shake me. I've given enough. I said, my tone firm. This is my line. Celeste started yelling, accusing me of ruining her big day. Dad joined in, calling me ungrateful. Mom finally spoke, her voice weak. Can't we talk about this? She pleaded. I shook my head. There's nothing to discuss. I grabbed my coat and walked to the door. Celeste's voice followed me, shrill and furious. You'll regret this, she screamed. Dad muttered something about family loyalty. I didn't look back. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside my car, waiting in the driveway. I'd said what I needed to say. The letter was my stand, my way of reclaiming my life. They could be mad, but I was free. I drove home, my hands steady on the wheel, knowing I'd just changed everything. The day after Christmas, my phone was flooded with messages. I woke up to a barrage of notifications, each one a jab from my family. Celeste's texts came first, sharp and venomous. You're so selfish, she wrote. How could you humiliate me like that? Another message followed. You think you're better than us, don't you? I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold. Her words stung, but I wasn't surprised. Celeste had always known how to twist things, making herself the victim while I was the villain. I didn't reply. Responding would only fuel her fire, and I was done playing her games. By noon, things escalated. I opened Facebook and saw Celeste's public post pinned to the top of her profile. Some people care more about money than family, it read. My sister would rather let my wedding fall apart than help out. So much for family happiness. The post had dozens of likes and comments, mostly from her friends, piling on with, "That's awful." And what kind of sister does that? My stomach twisted. She wasn't just venting. She was painting me as the monster who'd ruined her big day. I scrolled through the comments, each one a knife. People who barely knew me were calling me heartless, greedy, a disgrace. I wanted to scream to set the record straight, but I bit my tongue. Engaging would only make it worse. Then the local gossip started. Evelyn, a family acquaintance who lived a few blocks from Mom and Dad, was spreading the word around Springfield. I got a call from an old high school friend who'd heard it at a coffee shop. "Is it true you refused to help your sister with her wedding?" she asked, her voice dripping with judgment. "Evelyn's telling everyone you're too cheap to support your family." I clenched my jaw, explaining I wasn't obligated to bankroll anyone, but the damage was done. At the grocery store, I caught neighbors whispering, their eyes starting toward me. "That's the one who let her sister down." I overheard Springfield was small, and Evelyn's loose lips were making sure everyone knew her version of the story, that I was a stingy loner who'd turned my back on family. I kept my head down, refusing to take the bait. Celeste's texts kept coming, each one nastier than the last. "You'll never understand what family means," she wrote. Dad chimed in with a voicemail, his voice heavy with disappointment. "We raised you better than this," he said. "You've embarrassed us all." Mom sent a single text. "Please just talk to us." I read it, then put my phone on silent. Their words hurt, but I wasn't going to let guilt pull me back in. I'd spent years giving money for their bills, time I didn't have, and they'd taken it for granted. Now, because I'd said no, I was the bad guy. It wasn't fair, but it was their playbook, shame me until I gave in. I knew I couldn't stay in Springfield. The whispers, the messages, the Facebook posts, they were suffocating. I needed a fresh start. Somewhere they couldn't reach me. That's when I decided to leave. I'd always loved my job as a marketing specialist, and my company had an office in Roanoke, Virginia, a quiet city far enough to feel like a new world. I emailed my boss that week asking about a transfer. "I'm looking for a change," I wrote, keeping it vague. He replied quickly saying there was an opening in Roanoke and they'd be happy to have me. I felt a spark of hope the first in weeks. Moving wasn't just about escaping. It was about building a life where I called the shots. I spent the next few days researching apartments in Roanoke, scrolling through listings for one-bedroom places with big windows and quiet streets. I didn't tell anyone in my family about my plans. Celeste was too busy playing the victim online, and Dad and Mom were still stewing over my letter. Evelyn's rumors kept spreading, but I tuned them out. I wasn't going to waste my energy fighting lies. My focus was on the future, packing up my life, tying up loose ends at work, and getting ready for a new chapter. Springfield had been my home, but it was starting to feel like a cage. I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself. By the end of the week, I'd set a date to meet with HR about the transfer. Roanoke was waiting, and I was ready to go. By February, I was packing for Roanoke. My company had greenlit my transfer, and I'd found a one-bedroom apartment online. A cozy place with a view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I spent my evenings boxing up books, clothes, and dishes. Each item a step toward a new life. Springfield's small-town gossip and my family's relentless pressure were fading into the background. I felt lighter, like I was shedding a weight I'd carried for years. My boss called to confirm the details. Same marketing role, new office, fresh start. I signed the lease electronically, wired the deposit, and started mapping out my move. Roanoke wasn't just a new city. It was my chance to rebuild without my family's shadow. I met Jacob, my best friend, for coffee before I left. We sat at a quiet diner away from Springfield's prying eyes. "You're doing the right thing," he said, stirring his coffee. "Your family's been using you for too long. Cut them off for good." His words hit home. Jacob had seen how Celeste drained me, how Mom and Dad always took her side. He'd been there when I'd vented about paying her bills only to watch her blow money on things she didn't need. "You deserve to live for yourself," he added. I nodded, grateful for his support. He wasn't just cheering me on, he was reminding me why I needed to let go. I promised to stay in touch, and we hugged before I headed back to pack. A few days later, I got a strange envelope in the mail. It was from Dad, but the handwriting looked like Celeste's. Inside was a document labeled Family Fund Agreement. My heart sank as I read at a contract demanding I pay $25,000 a year into a so-called family fund, supposedly for Mom and Dad's retirement. The signatures, Dad's and Celeste's, looked too perfect, almost forged. It claimed I'd agreed to this during a family meeting I'd never attended. I felt a chill. This wasn't just another demand. It was a calculated move to trap me. They'd gone from guilt, tripping me, to outright deception. I called my bank to confirm no new accounts had been opened in my name. All clear, the representative said, but I wasn't taking chances. I took the document to a lawyer the next day. She scanned at her brow, furrowing. "This isn't legally binding." She said, "It's sloppy, likely fabricated. You should protect yourself." She suggested a restraining order against Celeste, given her pattern of harassment. I didn't hesitate. I filed the paperwork at the county courthouse, my hands steady as I signed. The order wouldn't stop Dad or Mom, but it would keep Celeste at a distance. No calls, no texts, no showing up at my door. The clerk said it had taken a few weeks to process, but just filing it gave me a sense of control. I wasn't just running. I was drawing a line they couldn't cross. The day before I left, I walked through my Springfield apartment one last time. The walls were bare, the furniture gone to storage or sold. I thought about the years I'd spent here trying to please a family that never valued me. Celeste's fake contract was the final proof they didn't see me as family, just a resource. Dad's signature on that paper hurt the most, a betrayal I hadn't expected. Mom hadn't signed it, but her silence through all this spoke volumes. I locked the door, dropped the keys with my landlord, and loaded my car. As I drove out of Springfield, the city's familiar streets blurred behind me. I landed in Roanoke on a chilly February morning. My new apartment smelled of fresh paint, and the view of the Blue Ridge Mountains felt like a promise of freedom. I spent my first week unpacking, arranging bookshelves, and settling into my marketing job at the company's new office. For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of my family's expectations. I walked to a local cafe, ordered coffee, and sat by the window, feeling like I could finally breathe. Roanoke was quiet, a stark contrast to Springfield's suffocating gossip. I was starting over, and it felt good, really good. That sense of peace didn't last. A week into my new life, my phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. "You can't run from family," it read. "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." I knew it was Celeste. Even with a restraining order pending, she was still trying to get under my skin. I deleted the message, but my stomach churned. Her threat wasn't just words, she'd already proven she could turn people against me. I blocked the number and tried to focus on work, but her words lingered, a dark cloud over my fresh start. 2 weeks later, trouble hit my new job. My manager called me into her office, her face serious. "We've heard some concerns," she said, folding her hands. Rumor's going around that you misrepresented your qualifications." I stared, stunned. "That's not true," I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. She nodded, but asked me to clarify my background with HR. As I left her office, I felt the familiar sting of Celeste's handiwork. She wasn't just harassing me, she was trying to sabotage my career. I spent that evening digging through my emails and old resumes, making sure every detail was airtight. The accusation was baseless, but it was spreading, and I needed to know how. I called Jacob that night. He'd stayed in Springfield, but kept in touch, always ready to listen. "I heard something," he said, his voice low. "A coworker of yours, someone who knows Celeste's fiancé, mentioned you at a bar. Said you lied about your experience to get the Roanoke job." I gripped the phone, my mind racing. Celeste had used her network to plant the rumor, leveraging her fiancé's connections to reach my new workplace. Jacob had heard it from a mutual colleague who'd been at that bar, piecing it together when the coworker mentioned Celeste's name. "She's not letting go," Jacob warned. "You need to shut this down." His words were a lifeline, giving me the clarity I needed. The next day, I requested a meeting with HR. I walked into the office with a folder of documents, my resume, performance reviews from Springfield, and emails confirming my transfer. "I've heard the rumors," I told the HR manager, keeping my tone calm. "They're coming from my sister, Celeste. We have a personal dispute and she's trying to discredit me." I explained the history briefly, her demands, the fake contract, the restraining order without diving into every detail. I handed over my credentials, showing every certification and project I'd led. The HR manager listened, flipping through my file. "This looks solid," she said, her expression softening. "We'll investigate the source of the rumor." A week later, HR called me back. They'd traced the rumor to an external email sent to a junior staff member claiming I'd faked my qualifications. The email's IP address linked to a cafe in Springfield, and the wording matched Celeste's style, vague but vicious. HR dismissed the claim as unfounded, citing my verified records. "You're in the clear," the manager said. "We're sorry this happened." I thanked her, relief washing over me. Celeste's attempt to ruin me had failed, but I knew she wouldn't stop. I saved the HR report just in case I needed it later. Roanoke was my home now, and I wasn't going to let her take it away. 6 months later, a message from Florence pulled me back. Florence, my cousin, texted me out of the blue saying Mom and Dad wanted to make things right. She insisted the family was ready to talk to heal the rift. I was skeptical, but a small part of me wondered if they'd finally seen my side. I'd built a good life in Roanoke, new friends, a steady job, a routine that felt like mine. Still, closure sounded tempting. I booked a weekend trip to Springfield, telling myself I'd listen, but keep my guard up. I arrived at Mom and Dad's house on a warm August afternoon. Florence greeted me at the door, her smile cautious. Inside, Celeste sat at the dining table. Her arms crossed while Dad flipped through a notebook full of numbers. Mom poured iced tea, her hands fidgeting. The air felt heavy, like they'd rehearsed this. Florence started, her voice soft. "We just want the family to be whole again," she said. I nodded, waiting for the catch. It didn't take long. Dad cleared his throat and slid the notebook toward me. "Your mom and I are getting older," he said. "We need help with living expenses, groceries, utilities, maybe a new car." Celeste jumped in, her tone sharp. "You're doing well in Roanoke," she said. "You could chip in a few thousand a month. It's only fair." I stared at the notebook, a list of expenses, neatly typed: rent, medical bills, even a line for miscellaneous. It wasn't a request. It was another demand dressed up as family duty. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't reconciliation. It was a trap, just like before. They hadn't changed. They still saw me as their wallet, not their daughter or sister. I pushed the notebook back. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not paying for your lives." Celeste's eyes narrowed. "You owe us," she snapped. "After all we've done, you can't just walk away." Dad's face wrinkled. "This is about family responsibility," he said, his voice rising. Mom looked down, silent as always. Florence tried to mediate, saying, "Let's calm down," but I'd heard enough. I stood my chair, scraping the floor. "I've given you years of my time and money," I said, looking at Celeste. Then, "Dad, I'm done. This is the last time we're having this conversation." Celeste stood too, her voice venomous. "You'll regret turning your back on us," she said. Dad shook his head, muttering about ingratitude. Mom finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Can't you just help a little?" she asked. I looked at her, wishing she'd stood up for me just once. "I've helped enough," I replied. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. Florence followed, apologizing, but I waved her off. "It's not your fault," I told her. I stepped outside, the summer heat wrapping around me, and didn't look back. I drove straight to a hotel, unwilling to stay in Springfield another night. My phone buzzed with texts from Celeste. More accusations, more guilt trips. I blocked her number for good. Dad sent a single message. "You're making a mistake." I deleted it. Mom didn't reach out, and that hurt more than I expected. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to please them, always hoping they'd see me as more than a resource. They never did. I checked out of the hotel the next morning and drove back to Roanoke, the miles between us growing with every turn of the wheel. Roanoke welcomed me back with its quiet. streets, and mountain views. I walked into my apartment, dropped my bag, and felt a weight lift. Springfield was my past, a chapter I'd finally closed. I wasn't running anymore. I was choosing my own path. My job was waiting. My friends were there, and my life was mine. I'd faced my family one last time and walked away whole. They could keep their demands and their drama. I was free, and I wasn't going back. A year after I left, I got an update from a mutual friend. Celeste had lost her job at the marketing firm where she'd worked for years. Apparently, her habit of spreading false rumors caught up with her. A colleague uncovered evidence that Celeste had fabricated stories about coworkers to climb the ranks, and the company fired her after an investigation. I wasn't surprised. Her lies had nearly cost me my career in Roanoke, so it felt like justice that her actions finally had consequences. I didn't feel joy, just a quiet sense of closure knowing she couldn't hurt me anymore. The friend also told me about Dad and Mom. Without my financial support, they were struggling to make ends meet. Their pension barely covered the basics: groceries, utilities, and a modest apartment. They'd sold their old car and moved to a smaller place outside Springfield. I felt a pang of guilt, but it passed quickly. They'd chosen to side with Celeste, expecting me to bankroll their lives. Now they were living with the reality of those choices. I wished them no harm, but I wasn't responsible for fixing their problems. In Roanoke, my life was flourishing. I'd been promoted to senior marketing manager, a role that challenged me and gave me purpose. I loved leading projects, brainstorming with my team, and seeing my ideas come to life. Outside work, I'd found a tight-knit group of friends. We'd hike the Blue Ridge trails on weekends, share dinners at local restaurants, and laugh over coffee about the little things. My apartment, once just a fresh start, now felt like home filled with books, plants, and memories I'd made on my terms. I was living for myself, and it felt liberating. Looking back, I learned hard lessons. Setting boundaries with people who take advantage of you isn't selfish, it's survival. My family saw my kindness as weakness, but saying no gave me strength. Prioritizing my mental health meant walking away from toxic ties, even if it hurt. I used to think family meant obligation, but now I know it's about mutual respect. Cutting them off wasn't easy, but it was the only way to protect my peace. I hope my story resonates with anyone facing similar struggles. Know that you're not alone, and it's okay to choose yourself. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you for listening. Your support means more than you know. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? How did you find the courage to put yourself first?